"Rancher, do you just want my body like everyone else's?" The widowed Apache woman whispered in fury. The sun hung low over the dusty plains of Red Mesa, casting long orange shadows across the barren land. The wind whispered over the rocks and dry grass, carrying the faint scent of burned sage. Elena Redfeather, a widowed Apache woman, stood on the edge of her small ranch, her dark eyes scanning the horizon. Her hands rested on the carved wooden fence posts, worn smooth from years of use. She had learned to survive in a world where trust was rare and betrayal was common. Since her husband had died, Elena had lived alone, tending to her animals and protecting her land. She had fought for it, not just for herself, but for her ancestors who had once roamed this land freely. The colony's new settlers, both human and alien, had little respect for her ownership. Many had tried to convince her to sell, to give up her rights, and almost all had assumed she would comply. Elena had grown bitter, wary, and fiercely independent. A faint rumble in the distance made her squint. Dust clouds rose on the far horizon. A figure was approaching on a horse, moving steadily but with purpose. Elena tightened her grip on the fence post. Visitors were rare here, and she did not welcome strangers. The rider stopped at the edge of her property. His wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, but she could see the outline of strong shoulders, a straight posture, and a steady gaze. He dismounted gracefully, careful not to scare her animals. "Good evening," he called, his voice calm and even. "I'm Caleb Ward. I've come about your land." Elena's heart tightened. Her land, her family's blood and sweat. How many times had she heard this line before? How many men, how many strangers had come with smooth words and hidden knives? She stepped forward, anger rising like a wildfire. "Do you think I'm like everyone else?" she snapped, her voice sharp. "Do you just want my land or my body? Because everyone else does." Caleb froze, not from fear, but from surprise. Her fury was palpable. He took a slow, careful step back, raising his hands, not to surrender, but to show he meant no harm. I don't want to take anything from you," he said softly. "I only want to talk." Elena narrowed her eyes. Words were cheap. Actions were what mattered. She had been lied to, cheated, and threatened too many times to believe a stranger's promises. "Talk?" she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Do you think your talk can erase the years of lies? The men who came before you, who took and took until there was nothing left?" Caleb stayed calm. He had seen anger like hers before, but he understood its source. He also knew that nothing could be gained by arguing or trying to convince her immediately. Sometimes respect and patience spoke louder than words. "I understand your anger," he said. "I can't change the past, but I can show you that not everyone is the same. I won't take what is yours without your consent." Elena studied him. The wind tugged at her dark hair and her hands tightened into fists. For a moment, she felt the old instinct. Fight first, trust never. But there was something different about him. Not arrogance, not greed. Calm, steadiness. "You talk a good line?" she said slowly. "But anyone can talk. I've heard it all before. Rich men, aliens, officials, they all say the same thing. And yet they take anyway." Caleb nodded, acknowledging her words. "I will not take what you do not offer. You have my word." She let out a bitter laugh. Word? That means nothing in this world? Do you know how many words have been broken against this land?" "I know enough," Caleb replied. "Enough to know that actions speak louder than words. If you let me, I will prove it. Elena's gaze softened just slightly. She had seen people like him, people who were willing to risk themselves for the right thing. But she also knew how rare they were, and even rare people could fail. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, her voice quieter now but still sharp. "Because I've nothing to gain from taking," he said, "and because I respect what you've built here. I don't need your land. I don't need your approval. I only want to help, if you'll let me." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Elena's mind wandered to her husband's memory, the life they had built together, and the betrayal that had left her alone. She had learned to fend for herself, to rely on no one. But the fire in Caleb's eyes was different from the fire of greed she had seen before. It was steady, honest. "You say you want to help?" she said slowly. "But how do I know you won't turn on me, like everyone else?" "I can only show you," Caleb said. "Not with words, with choices." Elena hesitated. She had been trained to doubt, to fight, to reject outsiders. But she also knew that stubborn isolation could lead to destruction. There were threats she could not handle alone. Corporate raiders, alien surveyors, legal officials who would ignore her claims if she lacked allies. "You have one day," she said finally. "One day to show me that you are not like the others. After that, leave or face me." Caleb nodded, accepting her challenge without a trace of offense. "One day is all I need." As he set up camp near her ranch, Elena returned to her chores, her mind uneasy. The wind carried his quiet footsteps, the soft clatter of equipment, the murmur of a man who moved without taking more than he needed. She had spent years guarding her land against greedy hands and selfish hearts. She did not let hope in easily, but a small seed of curiosity began to grow. By late afternoon, Caleb approached her again, not with papers, not with demands, but with a question. "Can you show me the geothermal vents?" he asked, referring to the source of heat and energy beneath her land. "I've read about them. They're powerful, dangerous. But you've protected them for generations. I want to understand, if you'll let me." Elena paused, unsure if she should answer. Her hands, calloused from years of labor, hovered near her hips. To reveal the vents was to reveal power, something others would kill for. But Caleb had not threatened her. He had asked, "Follow me," she said finally, her voice steady. "But you do not touch anything." Together they walked across the rocky plains. Elena pointed out landmarks, the natural channels of energy, the hidden geothermal springs. Caleb listened quietly, absorbing every detail, never interrupting, never asking for more than she offered. For the first time in years, Elena felt something she had not felt since her husband's death. A cautious trust, not blind trust, not naive trust, but a recognition that someone might be different. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting red light over the land, she looked at Caleb. He had not taken her land. He had not taken her body. He had simply been present, respectful, and patient. That was a radical thing in her world. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice low, "you will see more than this. But remember, one mistake, and I will not hesitate. This land is mine. My people's legacy is mine. You do not cross it lightly." Caleb nodded. "I understand." As night fell, Elena returned to her small cabin, lit only by a single lamp. She poured herself a cup of bitter coffee and thought about the future. The frontier was a harsh place, unforgiving and cruel. Yet, perhaps, it could also be a place of human ingenuity, courage, and respect. Perhaps, with the right people, humans could stand tall, not through domination, but through integrity. The stars appeared above Red Mesa, scattered and endless. Elena felt the weight of her past pressing against her, the memory of loss and the sting of betrayal. Yet, there was also a faint flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, not every outsider was the same. And maybe humanity, its strength, its cleverness, its ability to do what is right, was not dead on the frontier. Tomorrow would tell the truth. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over Red Mesa, painting the horizon in pale gold and soft pink. Elena Redfeather stood at the edge of her ranch again, watching the wind sweep the dust across the plains. She had not slept well. Her mind was full of questions, doubts, and the faint stirrings of hope. Caleb Ward had kept his promise. He had not touched her land. He had not bargained, begged, or tried to manipulate her. Instead, he had simply shown patience and respect, observing her work, helping where needed, and listening when she spoke. That alone was extraordinary. Elena was wary as always, but today she decided to give him a closer look at the land's most important secret, the geothermal vents that ran beneath her property. These vents were dangerous if mishandled, but they were also the reason her land had power. For generations, her people had guarded them carefully, using them to provide heat and energy without destroying the environment. "Follow me," Elena said, motioning toward a narrow path winding through jagged rocks. "You stay close, you watch, and you do not touch anything. Understand?" Caleb nodded. "I understand." They walked in silence, the only sound the crunch of gravel under boots and the occasional call of a distant bird. Elena's sharp eyes scanned the terrain constantly. The frontier could be unforgiving. Even the smallest mistake could lead to injury, or worse. As they reached a cluster of steaming vents, Elena stopped. She crouched beside a small pool of hot water and let the steam rise around her. Caleb observed quietly, his eyes wide with fascination. "These vents are our lifeline," Elena said softly. "They give us warmth, energy, and a way to survive where others fail. But they can kill, too. One careless step, one wrong move, and it's over." Caleb nodded again, impressed by her knowledge and care. "You've protected this land for years," he said. "That takes courage." Elena's dark eyes narrowed. "It takes respect for what you hold. Most people don't have it." They walked further, and Caleb asked questions, not to challenge her, but to learn. He asked about the history of her people, the way the vents worked, and how her ancestors had lived with the land instead of conquering it. Elena spoke, sometimes softly, sometimes sharply, but always with pride. "You could sell this land," Caleb said eventually. "You could get rich, move somewhere safe, start over. Why stay?" Elena's lips pressed together. "Because this land is not mine alone. It belongs to those who came before me, to those who will come after. I protect it because no one else will. And I trust no one else to do it right." Caleb did not argue. He understood more than she knew. He had seen countless people fail to honor history, to protect what mattered. But humans, when they chose to, could be surprisingly clever, resilient, and morally strong. That was the kind of strength Elena needed to see. Before they could return to the ranch, a distant rumble caught Elena's attention. Dust rose on the horizon, moving quickly toward them. Her heart tightened. "Corporate enforcers. They're early," she muttered under her breath. Caleb stepped closer. "Who are they?" "Elites from the Nova Corp colony. They want to take my land," Elena said. "They don't care about rules, about people, about anything but power and profit. They've been trying for years, and they always win." Caleb squared his shoulders. "We'll stop them." Elena's eyes flicked toward him, surprise clear. "Stop them? How? They have weapons, machines, people. You and I are just people. Caleb's gaze met hers. Exactly. People who refuse to be used. People who choose to protect what is theirs. That is how we stop them. Elena studied him. He was serious, not reckless, not naive. Serious. The wind carried a faint metallic hum as the dust cloud drew closer. Elena could see the vehicles now. Novacorp, drones, and armored transports moving toward the ranch. They'll be here in minutes, Elena said. Caleb nodded. Then we prepare. Elena moved quickly, showing him how to use the terrain to their advantage. The geothermal vents were dangerous, yes, but they could also be used to defend the land. Pools of hot water, steam vents, and narrow, rocky paths could slow down attackers and give the defenders an edge. You're learning fast, Elena said, watching him handle the harsh environment. Caleb smiled faintly. You've trained me well. The first of the Novacorp enforcers arrived at the edge of the property. They moved with confidence, expecting Elena to surrender. But she did not flinch. She stood tall, her dark hair blowing in the wind, her hands on her hips. Caleb remained by her side, not in front, not behind, but equal. Leave this land, Elena called out, or face the consequences. The leader of the enforcers laughed. Consequences? You're alone, woman. Step aside or we take what's ours. Elena's eyes burned. This land is mine by birth, by law, and by honor. You will not take it. Caleb stepped forward. She speaks the truth. Back away. The enforcers hesitated, surprised by his calm tone. Caleb did not carry a weapon. He carried no devices, yet there was authority in his stance, in the way he refused to be intimidated. Elena whispered, "Be careful. They won't hesitate." "I know," Caleb replied. A few moments later, the enforcers advanced, but the geothermal vents did their work. Hot steam rose from fissures in the ground, forcing the intruders to slow down. Pools of boiling water blocked paths. Rocky outcrops became natural barriers. Caleb and Elena moved strategically, guiding the land's defenses without violence, relying on intelligence and knowledge instead of brute force. Humans from nearby settlements, alerted by signals Caleb had sent earlier, began to arrive. They did not come as soldiers or mercenaries. They came as neighbors, people who believed in fairness, in justice, and in protecting what was right. They brought barriers, sensors, and tools, not to destroy, but to defend. The Novacorp enforcers were stunned. This was not a fight they could win with intimidation or technology alone. The humans stood together, clever and resolute, turning the terrain into a natural fortress. Elena felt a flicker of hope. She had never imagined that so many would stand with her simply because it was the right thing to do. Caleb had shown her that not all humans were like the greedy ones who had taken so much from her. Hours passed. The enforcers retreated, frustrated and humiliated. They had underestimated the strength of humans who refused to be dominated. Elena's land was safe. For now, she turned to Caleb, her expression unreadable. You really are different." Caleb shook his head. "I'm not different. I just choose to do the right thing. That is what makes us strong." Elena considered this. Strength. Not weapons, not wealth, not cruelty, but choice. The ability to act with intelligence, courage, and morality. That was human strength. That was HFY. That night, as the stars appeared over Red Mesa, Elena sat by her small fire. She thought about the day, the danger, the courage, the unexpected help from others. She had survived alone for years, but today she saw a new truth. Humans could be more than survivors. They could be guardians, protectors, and a force for good. Caleb sat nearby, quietly checking the defenses. He did not ask for thanks or recognition. He had proven himself through action, not words. Elena respected that more than she could express. "This is only the beginning," she said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. "The world is harsh and people are cruel. But perhaps it does not have to be that way. If humans choose rightly, we can stand tall. Not by taking, not by killing, but by defending what is ours and protecting others who cannot protect themselves." Caleb looked up and nodded. "Exactly. And we start here, with this land, with this people, with this choice." Elena smiled faintly. It was a small smile, but it carried weight. She had not fully let her guard down, not yet. But for the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. The frontier was harsh, yes, dangerous, unforgiving. But it could also be a place of courage, cleverness, and human dignity. And maybe, just maybe, humanity was not so broken after all. The morning sun spilled over the jagged cliffs of Red Mesa, painting the land in gold and shadow. The air smelled of dust, sage, and steam from the geothermal vents that Elena Redfeather had protected for generations. After the confrontation with the NovaCorp enforcers, Elena's land had a fragile sense of peace, but she knew better than to trust it. She walked along the fence line, her eyes scanning the horizon. Her horses stirred nervously in the corral, sensing her tension. Caleb Ward was already at work near the geothermal vents, inspecting the protective barriers they had set up. Though he had no weapons, he moved with confidence, guiding the technology they had installed to monitor the land and warn of approaching danger. Elena called out to him, "Any signs yet?" "Not yet," Caleb replied, his eyes focused on the sensors. "But NovaCorp will return. They won't give up that easily. They've tried before, and they'll try again." Elena's lips pressed together. "Then we must be ready. We cannot rely on luck. For generations, her people had survived because they understood the land, not because they had weapons or armies. The geothermal vents, the narrow paths, the rocky cliffs, all of it was part of a natural defense system." Elena began teaching Caleb more about these defenses. Together, they mapped the land, planned escape routes, and created traps that were non-lethal but highly effective. Slippery paths, steam vents, and natural obstacles that could delay or confuse intruders. "You think like a strategist," Elena said, watching Caleb sketch the plan in the dirt with a stick. "I've learned from the best," Caleb replied, glancing at her. "You've lived here your whole life. You understand the land. I just put it together." Elena gave a small smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. It was rare for her to trust someone fully, but Caleb had earned a small portion of that trust, not because he was perfect, but because he had chosen to act correctly when it mattered most. By midday, distant dust clouds appeared on the horizon. NovaCorp had returned, but this time, they brought more than vehicles. They brought drones, mechanized machines, and human mercenaries who had no loyalty to the land or its people. They came for one purpose: control. Elena and Caleb moved quickly, activating alarms and guiding neighboring settlers who had volunteered to help. These were ordinary humans, not soldiers, but they were clever, resourceful, and brave. They knew that NovaCorp could not be defeated by technology alone. They had to rely on wit, coordination, and understanding of the terrain. The first wave of drones approached. Caleb directed the defenders to a narrow canyon where the machine's size would work against them. Steam vents, strategically opened, obscured vision and caused sensors to malfunction. The drones slowed, confused, and began to cluster together. Elena guided the settlers to reinforce barricades and create narrow choke points. The humans worked quickly, improvising using ropes, rocks, and equipment scavenged from the land. The energy beneath Red Mesa was their secret weapon. They could use steam, heat, and terrain to control the battlefield without firing a single bullet. Novacorp's mercenaries pressed forward, but they had underestimated the settlers' knowledge of the land. The humans anticipated their movements, cut off access to vital points, and redirected the machines into traps. One drone slipped into a hidden geothermal pit, its metal frame warped by the heat. Another tried to bypass the barricade and was forced into a narrow pass where it got stuck. Elena moved like a shadow, her presence commanding but unseen by most. She whispered instructions to Caleb, who relayed them to the settlers. Each step was calculated, each action deliberate. They were not just defending land. They were proving something about humanity itself. Cleverness, ingenuity, and moral courage were more powerful than brute force. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower in the sky. Novacorp's forces were faltering. Their machines were damaged, their drones disabled, and their mercenaries frustrated and exhausted. Elena watched from a high ridge as Caleb coordinated with the defenders, using signals and clever maneuvers to turn the tide. "You have led well," Caleb said quietly, standing beside her. "You followed well," Elena replied, her eyes still on the horizon. "Most people would panic. You've kept calm, thought ahead. That is strength." Caleb smiled faintly. Strength comes from knowing what matters and protecting it. Finally, the Novacorp forces began to retreat. They realized that they could not win by force and that their usual methods, money, intimidation, violence, were ineffective against humans who understood the land and worked together. Elena exhaled slowly. She had not expected victory, at least not so cleanly. Yet, as she watched the dust settle, she understood something deeper. Humans could stand together and be unstoppable, not because they had weapons, but because they had knowledge, courage, and unity. Later, as the stars appeared above Red Mesa, Elena sat by a fire outside her cabin. Caleb joined her, quietly stoking the embers. Neither spoke for a while, letting the crackling fire fill the silence. "You've changed things today," Elena said finally. "Not just for me, but for everyone who watches this land. They will think twice before returning." Caleb nodded. "They will. And they will learn that humans do not give up easily. That we fight with more than strength. We fight with intelligence, morals, and heart." Elena considered this. She had always thought of humans as selfish, greedy, and unreliable. But today, she had seen something different. Humans could choose to be brave. Humans could choose to be clever. Humans could choose to do the right thing, even when it was difficult. "Do you know why I stayed?" she asked, turning to him. "Why?" "Because my husband believed in this land. He believed in us. He believed that humans could be more than conquerors. And I want to see that too. I want to believe that not all humans are like those who took so much from us." Caleb's gaze softened. "You already know that, Elena. Today proved it." The wind swept over the mesa, carrying the faint scent of burning sage and hot earth. Elena closed her eyes, letting the wind wash over her. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of hope. The frontier was harsh, dangerous, and unpredictable. But it could also be a place where humans stood tall, not by exploiting others, but by protecting what mattered most. Her mind turned to the future. Novacorp would return, and new challenges would appear. But now, she understood that humans could rise above greed and fear. They could use intelligence, courage, and cooperation to survive and thrive. That was the true power of humanity, and it was stronger than any weapon. She looked at Caleb, her expression calm but determined. Tomorrow, we prepare for them again. They will not stop coming. But we are ready. We have each other, and we have the land. Caleb nodded. And that is enough. Humans always find a way when they refuse to be defeated. Elena smiled faintly. Not a full smile, yet, but a spark of trust was growing. She had learned that humans could be clever, resourceful, and brave. They could stand together and protect what mattered. And perhaps, just perhaps, she could allow herself to hope for something more than survival. The night deepened over Red Mesa, the stars reflecting off the steam rising from the geothermal vents. Elena's land was safe, at least for now. But more importantly, she understood that humanity's greatest strength was not in domination or weapons, but in intelligence, courage, and moral choice. And with Caleb at her side, she knew that the future, no matter how dangerous, could be shaped by those who chose to stand tall, not because they had to, but because they chose rightly. The morning sun touched Red Mesa with pale gold light, casting long shadows over the rugged land. Elena Redfeather stood at the top of a small ridge, looking down over her ranch. The wind whispered through the rocks, carrying the faint scent of sage and earth. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. Today was different from yesterday. Today, the challenges were not only outside, they were inside, in the doubts that crept into her mind. Since the battle with the Nova Corp enforcers, she had learned that survival alone was not enough. Defending the land was one thing, but keeping it safe while ensuring its people thrived, that was something else entirely. And that required more than skill or knowledge. It required leadership. Caleb Ward approached quietly, carrying a small box of tools he had gathered for maintenance of the geothermal vents. He noticed the tension in her shoulders. "You're thinking too much," he said gently. "I'm thinking exactly what I should," Elena replied, her voice sharp but not unkind. "I survived alone for years. I fought everyone who tried to take my land. But now, people look to me, settlers, neighbors, even you. Leadership is heavier than any weapon." Caleb nodded, setting the tools down. "It is heavier. But leadership is also a chance to make a difference. You don't have to do it alone." Elena sighed, looking over the land. The geothermal vents hissed softly, steam curling into the morning air. These vents had always been a secret she guarded closely. Now, she realized, she would need to share their knowledge with others to ensure the land's safety. But teaching others meant trusting them, and trust was not something she gave easily. "Can I trust them?" she whispered. "Or will they fail me when it matters most?" Caleb put a hand on her shoulder. "You'll only find out by trying. And I promise, I won't let you down." Elena studied him. Caleb had proven himself in battle and in patience, but she knew that leadership was not about one person, it was about inspiring others, teaching them, and guiding them to make the right choices. She had never been a leader before. She had been a survivor. And survival was different from leadership. By noon, the neighboring settlers began to arrive at her ranch. They were ordinary humans, farmers, herders, and miners, but they carried the determination of people who refused to be dominated. Elena greeted them cautiously. She did not smile, did not lower her guard, but she welcomed their presence. Caleb guided the settlers to key positions, showing them how to use the terrain, the geothermal vents, and natural barriers to protect the land. Elena observed quietly. She saw the fear in their eyes, yes, but also the courage. They were ordinary people, Yet they were learning to think like defenders. That gave her hope. "You're doing well," Caleb whispered to her. "You're teaching more than just strategy. You're teaching them to think, to act, to survive." Elena nodded slowly. "I hope they understand. I cannot protect this land forever. They must." As the sun began to dip low, another threat appeared on the horizon. NovaCorp had returned, but this time, they were smarter. They had spies, saboteurs, and insiders who knew the land. Their approach was subtle, aiming to divide the humans rather than overpower them. Elena felt a cold dread settle in her chest. "They know our strengths now," she said, her voice low. "And they will try to use our weaknesses against us." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Then we adapt. We think faster, move smarter, and act together." Elena realized that leadership was not only about defense, it was about preparation, prediction, and courage. She called the settlers together, speaking plainly. "This land is ours, not because we are stronger, not because we are faster, but because we refuse to give up. NovaCorp will test us. They will try to divide us, but if we stand together, think clearly, and act wisely, we cannot fail." The settlers listened, inspired not just by her words, but by the certainty in her tone. Elena felt a strange warmth in her chest, an unfamiliar emotion that bordered on pride. Perhaps this was what leadership felt like. Night fell, and the camp was quiet, except for the faint hiss of steam from the vents. Elena sat near the fire, Caleb beside her. They spoke little, each lost in thought. The battle had been won, yes, but the struggle for true control over the land was far from over. NovaCorp would return with new tactics, new challenges, and new threats. "You're tired," Caleb said softly. "I am," Elena admitted. "But tired is better than defeated. And defeated is better than giving up." Caleb smiled. "You teach well by example. Humans can stand together. We can survive anything if we refuse to be broken." Elena thought about the words. Humans, she realized, were not defined by fear or greed. They were defined by choice, by the courage to act rightly even when the easy path was wrong. That was the essence of strength. That was the essence of HFY. Suddenly, a faint sound reached her ears, a whisper on the wind, a movement in the shadows. She tensed, her instincts honed from years of survival. Caleb noticed and reached for her hand, steadying her without touching her weapon. "They're testing us," she said quietly. "NovaCorp won't attack openly tonight. They will try to infiltrate, to gather information, to weaken our resolve." Caleb nodded. "Then we watch. We wait. We learn." Hours passed, and a small group of scouts returned, reporting minor attempts to sabotage the geothermal equipment. Elena examined the damage with precision, teaching the settlers how to repair it quickly and efficiently. She saw fear, yes, but she also saw determination. The humans were learning. They were adapting. "You see," she said to Caleb, "they are capable, but they need guidance. They need someone who refuses to give in to fear." Caleb looked at her, admiration in his eyes. "You are that someone, and they will follow you because they trust your judgment and your courage." Elena's mind drifted to her husband's memory. He had taught her to stand tall, to defend what was right, and to never give up. She had kept that lesson alive, even in isolation. Now, she realized, she was teaching it to a new generation, not just her people, but anyone willing to stand for what was right. The night deepened. Fires burned low and the geothermal vents hissed quietly in the darkness. Elena finally allowed herself a moment of rest. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility and the faint spark of hope. The frontier was harsh, dangerous, and unforgiving. But with humans who chose courage, intelligence, and unity, it could also be a place of triumph. Morning came again, bringing light to Red Mesa and clarity to Elena's mind. She understood that leadership was more than surviving. It was about teaching, inspiring, and standing firm even when the future seemed uncertain. She had chosen this path, and she would continue on it, not for glory, not for recognition, but because it was right. As she looked across the plains, Elena felt a sense of quiet determination. NovaCorp would return. New threats would emerge. But humans could meet them. Humans could stand tall, not through violence, but through intelligence, courage, and moral choice. That was the true power of humanity, and it was stronger than any corporation, any weapon, or any alien threat. Caleb approached, carrying a small journal. "We have much to prepare," he said. "The future won't be easy." Elena nodded. "Alice, nothing worthwhile ever is, but we are ready. We have each other. We have the land, and we will face whatever comes next together." The wind swept across Red Mesa, carrying the scent of sage, dust, and steam. Elena's eyes softened as she gazed at the horizon. She had survived alone, but now she understood that true strength came from standing with others, guiding them, and refusing to surrender.